What are you doing? Getting Bill's bike ready to get back. You can't. Why? Mate, this bike has a serious oil control issue. You're going to have to pull that top of that motor apart and have a look at it. Nah, she'll be right. It'll self-heal. The oil will go. Don't worry about it. No, that won't work. You're living in, I don't know what planet you're living on, but that was never going to work. Why? Don't be a lazy ass, jumped up, never come down, backward ass, brothel bred, son of a six-finger, banjo picking, hillbilly fuck. I've decided to pull the top of the motor apart and have a look. G'day everybody and welcome back. No, that was never going to work. I guess I was living in hope, as a few of us were, that it was just residual diesel and it would just needed a few good runs and it would clear itself. Well, that's not the case. And I can't live with myself and hand this back to Bill in the state that it's in. So we're going to pull the top of this motor apart. The object today is to get it apart and inspect it and have a look at what we might have to do to correct it. Then we might just have to save a few more dollars before we can buy the bits that we need. I'm tipping, but we'll have a look. So there's an oil control problem. That's either going to be valve guide seals and valves or guides, and or pistons and rings and bore. So we won't know until we delve in there. But the reality is that the last video I did, I was actually going to just dial in the idle circuits on the carburetors and run the balancer on it, and happy days, and away we go and give Bill his bike back. But I pulled the number one spark plug out and it was covered in oil, and I thought, nah, this isn't good. Well, I'll put the colour tune in anyway. So I put the colour tune in and it instantly oiled up. So there's plenty of oil going in there. It's always a waste of time trying to balance carburetors that when you haven't set your valve clearances anyway. So the whole thing was really only a half-assed job, and we can't live with that. So we'll try and do it properly. And there's no point trying to tune carburetors when you're trying to tune for petrol and oil burning. So we'll fix the oil burning, set the valve clearances correctly, and then we can set the carburetors up, and then hopefully we can give Bill back a bike that he doesn't have to worry about. Righto. I've taken the liberty of removing the carburetors and airbox. If you're joining us for the first time and you want to see how a GS1000 airbox and carburetors come off, just go back through the playlist and for the GS1000 and you'll find that information. I didn't bother filming it here. So, first job, get this tapper cover off, and then pull the camshafts out. Remove the plugs. Very, very, very oily. Just going to pull this clutch cable out of the way because it's kind of impeding us a little, could potentially impede us anyway. Okay, tacho drive has to come out. There's a retaining screw. And the cable should just pull out of there. Wow. She's a bit tight in there. Got him. Alright, so this is the tacho drive. That might have been a bit difficult to see in there, but there's a keeper plate that locates in a slot on the side, and there's a screw that retains the thing. It was just very tight in that seal. There's like an O-ring seal or something on there. Anyway, that's out. Okay, the exhaust has got to come out. And there's a combination of socket heads and hex heads on this bike. And I didn't bring home my in-hex sockets, so we're going to need to, probably wouldn't fit it in here next to the frame anyway. Just going to need to do it by the old-fashioned Allen keys. Not only is there a combination of Allen keys and hex heads, it's different size hex heads. Alright, so now there's just the one bolt holding on the muffler. And with a bit of luck we can extract our exhaust system. Voila. Okay, that's the exhaust gone. So now I want to remove the timing chain tensioner. I've positioned this on top dead center on cylinder 1. Don't think you have to do that, but I just do that as a matter of course. No matter what engine I'm pulling apart, I always put it on top dead center number 1 when I do that. So it's just a habit I've gotten into. Whether or not you need to, I don't know. Alright, so in here we have a set screw that will loosen this nut, tighten this set screw here, and that will clamp the chain tensioner in position where it is now. Then I can remove the 2 retaining bolts, and hopefully that whole tensioner will come free. Break the gasket and remove one tensioner. Alright, now we've removed that, we should have plenty of slack in our chain. And we can remove the top chain guide. And now we're ready to remove our camshafts. Now on the XS1100 you need to remove these sprockets. It states that in the manual. It doesn't state that in the Suzuki manual. What it does state is that when you remove the caps for the camshafts, that you need to put vice pliers on the camshaft itself and just gently hold them down while you remove it, so that it doesn't want to, the compressed the cam lobes that are compressing the valve springs don't want to deflect the cam and potentially crack or break the camshaft. So they tell you to clamp them down, remove the caps, then release the clamp, and that allows the camshaft to be free, and I should be able to manoeuvre it across and out from underneath this chain. I'll have to put a bit of wire on there so the chain doesn't plummet down into the sump. But I've left my locking pliers at work, so I'm going to have to disappear to work and go and get them. Today's Saturday. When we pick this up again, it'll be Sunday. And it's Sunday. So the plan here is to place these vice grip pliers onto the camshaft so that we've held it down. Now, sitting at top dead center number 1 on the inlet side of the camshaft, on the carburetor side, the number 3 cylinder is depressing the valve spring. The others are all off it, so we'll clamp it here, and we're talking a very light clamping. You don't want to have any bloody weight on this at all, just enough to hold it. So just like that, just so light. So that will now hold that down while we pull this off, and then we can release the clamp. And we need to do the same on the front. This is the exhaust side one. Very little bit of very light clamping force on that. So now we can attempt to remove these camshafts. Now, what's been a bit of a theme on this bike has got a lot of mismatched fasteners. In this case, on the right hand side of the bike, we've got 4 socket headed cap screws instead of the standard hex heads. Just got to very gently lift them off the dowels. Now it is imperative that these go back in the correct orientation and in the correct location. Because they're assembled and then machined and then disassembled, and then the engine goes together. So these are line bored with the head in that position. So Suzuki have thankfully taken care of that for us, and they have them. This has been designated D, which is the back right hand corner. The arrow faces the front of the bike, and the markings go A, B, C, D. So A in the front left corner on number 1 cylinder, and D in the back right, with the arrows facing forward. Now, if they don't have a factory stamp in there, then you need to use a center pop or number punches or something to identify where it came from and what orientation it was fitted in. All right, so we'll put that aside and continue. Alright, so we're just about ready to lift the camshafts out. Before I do, so we don't have to go fishing this timing chain out of the sump, a little bit of TIG filler wire here. You can use anything, just a bit of wire to secure that timing chain so that it doesn't just drop down into the sump. Right, now we should be able to allow that to come up. You can see that lifted. Had that been clamped at the back, it could have deflected and sheared that camshaft. So there we go, that's the one. It is designated inlet cam, looks pretty good. Alright, put him to the side, release the other clamp, up and out. So now essentially we just need to undo the fasteners on the cylinder head and all these nuts, and then we can lift the head off. There's 12 10mm or M10 studs, and there's 3 M6 fasteners. There's one here, there's one on the other side, and there's one at the front. The one at the front has gone missing, and the fin is actually snapped, where the tab where it bolts has actually been snapped off the cylinder head. So somebody has at some stage either forgotten to remove that and try to pry the head off, or they've used it as a lever point and snapped off on the head. So the first fasteners that you should undo are the smaller ones. So I'll just pop the 2 that are left out of there. 8mm socket. I've got a gut feel that this thing's going to fight us all the way. Different size, it's a 10mm, and it wasn't very tight. Not that they're overly tight anyway, but these other ones require a 14mm socket. And you want to start in the centre of the cylinder head and work diagonally in a cross pattern all the way back out. Might get rid of the other side. Let's see whether or not it wants to play play ball. Nice and easy. Glad. So there's a heap of washers on there that are difficult to get out. So I'm just letting them come off with the cylinder head, and I'll recover them then. Also, I managed to drop one of the nuts down in between the fins where it's hard to get to, so once I get the head off, I should be able to recover that lost lost nut. Okay, that guide should have come out first. I did not realise that. That's why you should read your manual. And once on the head. Let's pop the gasket off. Alright, so let's see how accommodating these barrels are, whether or not they'll be as easy to come off, whether the bottom gasket breaks nicely. One advantage here is that they run through the casting, these bolts. On the XS1100, they're in the atmosphere, so you can see the bolts through the fins, and they get a lot of debris and junk, and they crust up in there, and they end up hanging onto the barrel, which is a bloody nuisance. We'll see if we can gently pry that off. It's pretty stuck down there. Give it a couple of light taps. Don't like hitting on fins. I think that might have moved. No, dreaming. Especially blows like that, it'll snap pretty quick. Bloody buggers don't give you much option though, because there's not a lot of unfinned areas. It's a fairly solid part just here. Solid enough to break the timber. I've got a screwdriver in there, and this side's lifted as well. Not a tang through screwdriver, shouldn't be hitting it, I know all of that. And not a pry bar either, just quietly, it's only a screwdriver. So I'm not doing a lot right here, but needs must. Should be sitting on dowels. Presumably once we get it above that, it should be a lot easier to move. Slowly working it up. This is where having a mate here would be useful. One on one side and one on the other. But the cast iron barrels go down into the crankcase, and they seem to be a sticking point at the moment. No, they're clear now. It's tight on the studs. It is coming. It's just got to be even, and try not to wear it in the chin when it does finally break free. It is a struggle. Remember what I said about them not being exposed to the elements? Saying the outside ones that aren't, all the others are. So that's what's happening here. Just got to get through it. Be persistent, be patient. Don't break nothing. What I need is some little jacks. Little screw jacks that I can put in there. I don't have any here. Oh, I don't really have the facility to make any either. Oh, it occurred to me that I actually had these little little screw jack things that I'd made decades ago, and I can't even remember what I made them for, but hopefully they will help us out of the poo here. It looks like it might actually work. Oh, you bugger. Yep, well that took a minute. It wasn't the hardest thing I've ever tried to extract off studs. I have... The worst ones that I've come across have been predominantly British-made wet sleeve alloy engines. Jaguars and Triumph Stags and silly bloody things like that. In fact, my father in the early 90s had a V12 Jag, and I had to get the cylinder heads off that. And we had to make a tool up that bolted down to the cam bearings, and we had set screws that would jack on top of the head bolts, and you would just do a little bit at a time, bit of heat, a little bit at a time, bit of heat, and that took a couple of days to get the cylinder heads off. I could have made this a lot easier had I sort of realised by spraying some parts cleaner down through where the stud holes, and then blasting it out with compressed air, and that probably would have been enough. But instead, I ended up jacking the bloody thing off. It took me a couple of hours. But perseverance, we get there. So the next step is to assess what we've got, measure everything up, check it against the specs, have a look at what we need to do now to try and identify where our oil control issue is and rectify it. But right now, I'm going to wrap it up. My Brisbane Lions, my beloved Brisbane Lions, have made the 10-hour flight across the country to Perth. They're taking on the Fremantle Dockers this afternoon. A hell of a road trip. And either myself or maybe you, Richard Kilmartin, are going to have a bad afternoon. By the time this goes there, we'll all know. All right. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe and comment. I got a date with Fox Sports, and I'll catch you next time on Andy's Motorcycle Obsessions. Bye for now.
Back now for Langdon. Backtracking. Any score almost due. Walters! The seconds tick away. It'll be a shot after the siren. Any score will do. Michael Walters with the last kick of the Sir Doug Nicholls Indigenous round. Lines them up from 50. Strikes it true! Michael Walters wins the game for the